On the 7th of July 2021, the former president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, surrendered himself to police and began serving a 15-month prison sentence. What happened next, and as a result of that, sent South Africa into a state of political violence and unrest. So how did we get here? To understand the situation, you need to understand what state capture is. State capture is a very particular form of political corruption in which businesses and politicians conspire to influence the decision-making of a country in order to serve their own interests. It also involves a weakening of the laws and institutions that are meant to guard against corruption. The former president Jacob Zuma has been accused of being involved in the state capture of South Africa. These accusations are primarily due to the very close relationship between the Zuma family and the Gupta family. The Gupta family are a wealthy family who are involved in a number of businesses and business dealings within South Africa. They are also involved in a number of companies that have significant contracts with the South African state. It has been alleged that the Gupta family was able to insert themselves into a position where they were able to influence the running of the South African government. Public officials from various bodies have claimed that they were directly instructed by members of the Gupta family to make certain decisions. In 2018, a judicial commission of inquiry was instituted in order to investigate these allegations of state capture. This commission is led by the Deputy Chief Justice Ray Zondo. In December of 2020, Zondo ordered Jacob Zuma to testify before the commission with regards to his alleged role in the state capture. Jacob Zuma and his legal team tried to oppose this order. However, it was confirmed by the Constitutional Court, which ordered that Jacob Zuma must appear before the commission and answer questions. On the 4th of February 2021, Jacob Zuma defied this order and refused to appear before the commission. For refusing to appear, Jacob Zuma was charged with being in contempt of court, and he was sentenced to 15 months in prison on the 29th of June 2021. Zuma and his team have been trying to fight the order for him to appear before the commission for quite some time. The Zuma team has claimed that Zondo is biased against Zuma due to an alleged personal relationship between the two. However, Zondo has denied that such a personal relationship existed. In December of 2020, Jacob Zuma and his lawyers launched a legal challenge after Zondo did not recuse himself from the commission after these allegations of bias. Zuma and his team have argued that Zuma is not required to appear before the commission, while the High Court application to overturn the recusal decision is pending. It is important to note that even without the testimony of Jacob Zuma, the State Capture Commission is continuing their investigation, and it is expected that they will be submitting their report to President Cyril Ramaphosa between the end of August and September of 2021. The case regarding the sentencing of Jacob Zuma is due back in the Constitutional Court soon, and Jacob Zuma and his team will be hoping that the sentence is reduced or rescinded completely. That is the essential background to the case, which brings us now to the aftermath of Jacob Zuma's arrest. While many South Africans are pleased with the ruling and subsequent arrest of Jacob Zuma, he still has a significant number of ardent supporters who believe that he has done nothing wrong. Many of these supporters are protesting the arrest and have stated they will continue to mobilize until Jacob Zuma is freed from prison. Some South Africans have questioned why people would still support Jacob Zuma and protest his arrest. However, there are a few possible explanations for this. Some people have been supporting Jacob Zuma for years or even decades, and it is important to note that before he was president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma was a freedom fighter for the ANC during apartheid. There are also a significant number of people who do not believe the state capture allegations are true, with some even going so far as to say that current President Cyril Ramaphosa has used these allegations as a ploy to gain control of the ANC and the country. Some people also hold a view consistent with Jacob Zuma and his legal team that Jacob Zuma actually had no obligation to appear before the commission. Prior to the surrender of Jacob Zuma on the 7th of July, supporters were already beginning to mobilize in Nkandla, the home region of Jacob Zuma. Many supporters gathered outside of Jacob Zuma's home on the eve of the 7th of July as police approached the compound, claiming that they would not allow Jacob Zuma to be arrested. After Jacob Zuma surrendered to the police discreetly away from the eyes of supporters and the media, full-scale protests erupted throughout KwaZulu-Natal, with the first violent protest action being reported on the 9th of July 2021. The protest action has since spread to Gauteng, particularly the Johannesburg CBD, with the potential to spread to other areas of the country as well. However, what began as protests quickly have devolved into violence and chaos. Protesters have blocked roads and burnt vehicles and trucks, and motorists throughout South Africa have been advised to stay away from certain highways and routes. There have also been widespread reports of looting and physical violence throughout Johannesburg and KZN. On the 12th of July 2021, the South African Police Minister announced that the South African National Defence Force would be deployed in both Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal in order to assist police there with containing the violence. Many South Africans have criticised the government's response to the situation, calling on the government to have deployed the SANDF sooner and stating that the government and the SANDF and police forces should be using greater force in response to the violence, protests, looting and unrest that has been occurring. However, many times the people who are criticising the government have not stopped to recognise the complexity of the situation and the delicacy with which it needs to be handled. Bringing in the army should be a last resort option in any healthy and functioning democracy. It is true that the current level of violence has gone way beyond any sort of normal protest. But even with this level of violence, the government, the SANDF and the police force need to still act with restraint and with caution when dealing with the situation. Any excessive use of force by the police or by the SANDF may just escalate the situation rather than de-escalating it. Once again, this is a delicate situation, and while the government should have a firm response that condemns the violence, they also have a duty to not escalate and further exacerbate the current situation and cause more death and more destruction than is already unfolding. At this stage, it is unclear how many of those involved in the violence and the unrest are actually ardent Jacob Zuma supporters and how many are involved for other unrelated motives. Some of the people responsible for the violence are supporters of the former president. Some of the people are opportunistic criminals who are taking advantage of the chaos of the situation. And some are likely poor and vulnerable people who are in a desperate situation and are using this opportunity to try and feed their families or provide for themselves. There is also the possibility that there are people involved in the violence and the lootings whose motives we simply do not know yet. And while there is no excuse for violence, it is extremely important to understand the multiple facets and complexities and nuance of the situation we find ourselves in. It is not a good idea to group these people with vastly different motives for their actions together, as it undermines the complexity of the situation and it does not help us in understanding and therefore solving the current situation. It is very likely that the current unrest and violence is merely a symptom of some of the largest structural issues that are at play within South Africa. Issues such as widespread poverty and unemployment, vast inequality between citizens, and a lack of meaningful opportunities for those especially in the lower and working class. This has become a highly complicated situation with many different factors to consider, and it is a time for empathy, nuance, and understanding. However, many within South Africa have taken this opportunity to cause division, spread hatred, and misinformation instead. Many on social media are using the current violence as an excuse to show both covert and overt classism and racism. This is completely unacceptable and will only create further hatred and division within our country. We can and should condemn violence and destruction while still understanding the complexities and nuance of the situation, holding empathy, and without resorting to classist and racist rhetoric that will only divide us further. Another situation to address is the spreading of misinformation and fear-mongering. There have been numerous posts on social media as well as numerous chain messages on WhatsApp groups that have contributed to spreading false information about the current situation. This misinformation does nothing to help the situation and only serves to add to the level of panic the country is already experiencing. Before posting any information regarding the current situation, make sure that it is coming from a reliable source. It only takes a few seconds to Google and double check that something is true before you share it all over your social media. We are in an unprecedented situation and no one can say for certain exactly how it will turn out in the end. However, those that are fear-mongering by sharing worst-case scenarios and creating doomsday predictions are not helping the situation at all, and again are only further adding to the panic that this country is already experiencing. Speculating about the worst-case situations that are very unlikely to occur adds nothing constructive and does not do anything to solve the situation that we are in, but only makes people more fearful. Of course, the situation that we are living in is a dangerous situation, and especially those in affected areas are at risk. But it is possible to take sensible precautions for your safety without buying into the fear-mongering that is going on at the moment. We should all be acting as sensibly and responsibly as possible during this time. Staying at home where you can and are able to is a good idea at the moment. And obviously, if you are able to, please try and avoid any areas where there is suspected or confirmed protesting or violence and looting that is going on. That being said, it takes a certain degree of privilege to be able to avoid the protests and violence completely. And we should have empathy for those who are unable to stay home during this time, and for those who are unable to avoid the areas where there has been suspected or confirmed protests and violence. Now is the time for nuance and empathy and understanding, not for hatred, division, and misinformation. As South Africans, we will get through this difficult time, and we should use this time as an opportunity to spread love and positivity throughout our communities and our country. But we also have to acknowledge that thoughts and prayers alone will not change a nation. These protests and this level of violence has demonstrated that significant socioeconomic change is needed within South Africa if we are to pave a way to a brighter future. We need to hold our government and our elected officials accountable for facilitating the change that we wish to see in our country. This may turn out to be a pivotal event in South African history, and hopefully all the damage, destruction, and loss of life that has resulted from these protests can actually result in some positive structural change within the country and will not all be for nothing.